is 13 Wham News at 5.
Tonight, questions being raised about emergency response times after a naked woman in a mental health crisis is left sitting on a city street for 45 minutes. Rochester police arriving in just minutes, but getting an ambulance for that woman took much longer. Good afternoon, I'm Matt Malloy.
And I'm Chase Howell. That scene played out on South Avenue Monday afternoon. Police tell me they got blankets from a nearby shelter to keep that woman warm while they waited.
Rochester police first on the scene of a call for a mental health crisis on South Avenue Monday. A woman with 3 children stepping out of her car naked. Police say she was not compliant and they handcuffed her, wrapping her in blankets from a nearby shelter as they waited for more assistance.
The police department is typically the first to respond for mental health crisis in coordination with the PIC team, the person in crisis team, and then an ambulance and then the hospital services.
The city's person in crisis team arriving a short time later, but police say it took much longer for an ambulance to get there.
So in this case, it ended up being an ambulance from Gates that arrived after several other ambulance services were unavailable to arrive as well. The patient in this case, unfortunately, was waiting about 45 minutes for an ambulance to respond when she was clearly in crisis.
Lieutenant Greg Bello with RPD says the city has a contract with AMR Ambulance, but when a crew is tied up on other calls, the 911 center will request help from an outlying ambulance company.
Staffing is based upon an expected call volume, but there's always going to be peaks and flows of that volume. So at times, just like the police department, they're going to have more ambulances than are needed, and at other times, they're not going to have anywhere near enough ambulances, and that's the same thing with us as the police.
Bello says there is a high demand for mental health services across the board, at times overwhelming ambulance crews, police officers, and hospitals.
I think if you ask every one of those services, they're all pretty stretched right now to accommodate the amount of mental health cases in our region, in our city, specifically in our community here.
And just into the newsroom moments ago, a statement from the union representing AMR workers. It says in part, the incident that took place yesterday is unfortunately another example of system-wide stressors that have not eased over the past 3 years. The issues are multifold. And I asked Lieutenant Bello why the woman was left on the street for 45 minutes. He says she refused to go into a police car, and officers made the call it was safest to keep her in place.
Bosco has led Rochester's Police Accountability Board since May when the former executive director was suspended. Good evening to you. I'm Matt Malloy in for Doug. 13 Wham has obtained 2 letters sent to the PAB signed by 18 staffers alleging that Bosco has created a toxic work environment. As Carla Rogner reports tonight, this comes amid major staff departures at the PAB. Carla?
Yeah, Matt, the staff members who signed these letters accused Bosco of enabling an atmosphere of harassment, intimidation, retaliation, and confusion. They claim 15% of the PAB staff have been fired or left since he was put in charge in May. In a letter sent Tuesday to the PAB and City Council, 18 of the PAB's approximate 37 staff members call for drastic changes. They list several demands, including that acting manager Dwayne Bosco be terminated and replaced by Associate General Counsel Anthony J. Derwin. They also call for a firing freeze and for people who resigned or were fired under Bosco's leadership to be offered their jobs back. This comes amid staffing shakeups at the board. Last week, senior staff member Mike Higgins was suspended. We learned he's now been fired. Higgins was the chief of policy and oversight. In their letter, staff members said the decision followed an apparent pattern of retaliation and disciplinary action since Mr. Bosco was named acting manager. They called Higgins a well-respected supervisor and said he was abruptly and inexplicably put on administrative leave. Then a second senior staff member was ousted, Deputy Chief of Community Engagement Mozart Guerriere. The city confirms 2 other staffers had recently been fired as well. The board's executive director, Connor Dwyer Reynolds, has been suspended since May over human resources-related complaints. He then accused board chair Shawnee Wilson of sexual harassment, and she resigned. The PAB has a $5 million budget and was approved by voters in 2019. It has yet to issue any disciplinary recommendations for police accountability. And staff members wrote in the letter they are considering forming a labor union. A spokesperson for the Police Accountability Board could not immediately comment on this story. City Council President Miguel Melendez said he also could not comment on the most recent allegations because they are personnel matters.
More funding could be coming in the fight against fentanyl. 13 WAM's Cheyenne Walker explains where that money is coming from in the program that could help right here in our community.
Yes, Chase, we're talking about an additional $3 billion in the upcoming federal budget that, if approved, would help with the prevention, treatment, and recovery in the local opioid epidemic.
The Villa of Hope helps streamline services for those being treated for addiction. If approved, federal funding will enable the Villa to expand and provide more services.
Mental health and substance use often go hand in hand, and that is very common, which is why it was really important to us to have an integrated clinic, which means we have both mental health and substance use services right underneath one roof.
Senator Chuck Schumer says with the trafficking of rainbow fentanyl, now a major concern across the country, state, and here in Monroe County, the federal dollars are needed more than ever.
I'm going to use my clout as majority leader, and we are going to supercharge 3 silos of solution with an increase of $3.2 billion in the upcoming budget to help deal with the scourge of fentanyl. There's now, and that will bring federal funding to $42 billion. There are 3 silos: prevention, treatment, recovery.
So far this year in Monroe County, there have been 459 drug overdoses and 97 deaths, many victims in their mid-30s.
We always think of young people, which is very concerning, and college kids, which again is very concerning. But when you see someone at 35 pass away, you're getting both ends of the generation.
Sheriff Todd Baxter says while rainbow fentanyl is in Monroe County, there are no documented cases of anyone overdosing on the drug here yet.